There's a moment in your life when you realize you're not stuck because of your circumstances, you're stuck because of who you keep being. And the moment you see that clearly, everything begins to change. Not because the world shifts first, but because you do. We are taught to fix the outside, to solve the problem, to chase the goal, to wait for signs. But we're not told the secret. The reality you live in is only responding to who you are being. And who you are being is often just a reflection of your past. It's the story you've told, it's the role you've played, it's the wounds you've worn as identity. And the universe doesn't argue with identity, it mirrors it, it calibrates to it, it amplifies it. So if you keep showing up as the version of you who is waiting, who is doubting, who is hoping but not deciding, the field will keep waiting too. Because reality isn't personal, it's responsive. And that's where the observer effect comes in, not as a theory, but as a way of life. Because the moment you shift how you observe yourself, the moment you see yourself as new, as whole, as already chosen by your future, the old version loses its power, and reality shifts instantly. Not because time passed, but because identity changed. And identity is the root code of manifestation. It's the signal you emit constantly, without words, without effort, without even knowing. So if you want to change your life, stop asking how, and start asking who. Who am I being? Who do I keep rehearsing? Who do I keep expecting life to treat me as? Because that version is the one that's shaping your timeline. Not the one you dream about, not the one you journal about, the one you live as daily. And this is why letting go of the old you is not about fixing, healing, or becoming, it's about releasing the attachment to the version of you that no longer reflects your truth. It's about letting that identity fall away, not with force, but with clarity, with choice. Because the moment you stop being the old you stop generating the same outcomes, the same reactions, the same reflections. And it feels strange, it feels disorienting because the mind wants proof, the ego wants continuity, the body wants safety, but your soul wants expansion. And expansion begins where repetition ends. And that's where most people hesitate. They keep watching the old show, hoping the new one will appear. But the quantum doesn't work like that. It responds to presence, not performance. It responds to coherence, not craving. So when you shift into the version of you who already is, who already knows, who already walks as if it's done, the field mirrors that identity with matching opportunities. Not because you forced it, but because you became it. And becoming is not about changing everything overnight. It's about choosing in each moment to be more of who you truly are and less of who you were taught to be. And the more consistently you choose that, the faster the field aligns, the clearer the reflections become, the more obvious the shifts appear. And suddenly what felt impossible becomes inevitable, not because the world changed, but because you did. Because the you who is aligned doesn't wait, they walk, they speak, they act, they breathe from a different frequency. And that frequency doesn't need convincing, it simply vibrates, and reality listens. That's what the observer effect truly means. The act of observing with certainty alters the outcome. And the greatest observation you can make is the one you hold about yourself. So if you're still watching yourself through the lens of limitation, of failure, of not enough, then that is what your life reflects. Not because it's real, but because it's repeated. But when you drop that lens, when you stop looking at yourself through old eyes, the entire scene changes. Because you are the projector, not the screen, you are the author, not the story. And when you realize that the old scripts lose their grip, and you no longer perform the same patterns because you're no longer cast in the same role. And that shift in casting, that shift in story, is what bends timelines, is what accelerates manifestation, is what unlocks realities that once felt distant. And this is not wishful thinking, this is physics, this is frequency, this is coherence. And coherence means everything matches inside, there's no more pretending, there's no more split between what you say and what you are, between what you want and what you expect, it's all one clear signal. And that signal is potent, it's precise, it's powerful, and it only gets stronger the more you align with it. Because every time you choose presence over past, every time you choose soul over story, you reclaim power. Not from the world, but from yourself. You pull your energy back from projections, from fears, from doubts, and you anchor it here, now in the truth of who you are. And that truth becomes the tuning fork for your life. It becomes the magnet, the map, the movement forward. And the irony is, you were never meant to chase it, you were always meant to be it. But the mind made it complicated, the trauma made it conditional, the programming made it invisible. And now you're remembering. And in that remembering, you become untouchable. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because nothing can define you. And that is the difference between force and frequency. Force tries to control reality, frequency commands it. Without words, without noise, without struggle, just presence. And presence is your power. And this power doesn't scream, it whispers, it doesn't push, it pulls, it doesn't beg, it becomes. And when you become the signal, life meets you there. Not as a reward, but as a reflection. Because the universe doesn't grant worth, it mirrors identity. And the identity you hold now is either a cage or a code. And the moment you choose a new code, a new story, a new posture, a new breath, the matrix around you begins to rewrite itself. Not someday, not eventually, instantly. Because energy doesn't wait, and neither should you. You see, the moment you let go of the old version of you, the one who hesitated, the one who doubted, the one who shrank every time they felt seen, you create an energetic vacuum. And nature hates a vacuum, so it fills it instantly with the frequency you now hold. And that's why people say reality shifts instantly, not because you see the full manifestation right away, but because the field reorganizes in that moment, and everything that aligns with your new identity begins moving toward you. Not slowly, not eventually, but now. And the only delay is the one you place by slipping back into old frequencies, by doubting what already shifted, by trying to manage what's meant to move. And that's the art of surrender. It's not giving up, it's giving over to the flow you just initiated. It's trusting that your new signal is already in motion. It's knowing that your job is not to force the outcome but to maintain the state that summoned it. And that state is what people feel before they see your transformation. It's what makes them stop and stare, not at what you have, but at what you are. And when you become someone new, not by acting, but by aligning, the world has no choice but to respond. And that's why the observer effect is so powerful, because you are not just observing your reality, you are observing yourself into existence. And every time you choose to see yourself as whole, as worthy, as capable, you collapse the timeline where you're still trying to become and activate the one where you already are. Because everything is happening all at once, and your observation, your attention, is what selects the stream. So the question is, what version of you are you choosing to watch? What version are you energizing? What version are you rehearsing with your thoughts, with your breath, with your posture? And when that answer becomes conscious, everything changes. Because now you're not just reacting, you're creating. Deliberately, deeply, unapologetically. And that's when the magic becomes normal, the flow becomes consistent, the miracles become mundane. Not because you're lucky, but because you're tuned. And this tuning isn't fragile, it's foundational, it's the new standard you walk with. And every day you anchor it more, not through discipline, but through devotion, not through pressure, but through presence. And that presence is what bends your life back into truth, into alignment, into coherence. And coherence is the new wealth, the new magnetism, the new freedom. Because it allows you to move through the world without split, without noise, without the exhausting effort of being someone you're not. And that is the real quantum shift. Not in what you have, but in what you hold, in who you are being, in how you are vibrating right now. And when you hold a new frequency long enough, it stops being new, it becomes natural. And that's when reality has to obey, not because you forced it, but because you are no longer arguing with it, you're no longer sending mixed signals, you're no longer collapsing under the weight of old stories. And when those stories finally dissolve, what's left is power. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind, the steady kind, the rooted kind, the kind that doesn't need attention or applause or validation to stay alive. It just is. And from that place you create, not for approval, but for expression, not for safety, but for joy, not for control, but for connection. And this is the essence of letting go. Letting go is not about losing, it's about remembering what's real, what's true, what's always been waiting beneath the masks and roles and identities. And when you drop those layers, the world responds instantly, not because you became someone else, but because you returned to yourself, and you finally allowed the world to see that. And the observer effect works both ways. You observe yourself into reality, and the world observes you into form. So the more you show up as the true you, the more others begin to reflect that back, the more opportunities meet your essence, the more synchronicities affirm your signal. And that signal is always broadcasting not from your words, but from your being, not from your goals, but from your groundedness, not from your effort, but from your energy. And your energy is either remembering or resisting your wholeness. And if you've been stuck, if you've been repeating patterns, if you've been feeling unseen, it's not because you're broken, it's because you're holding on to a version of you that no longer exists. And that version can't take you where you're going. So it's not about fixing it, it's about releasing it and allowing the next version to lead, not from the future, but from this moment. Because the shift doesn't happen tomorrow, it happens now, the second you decide, the second you feel, the second you embody. And embodiment is not about pretending, it's about presence. It's about walking into every room, every decision, every conversation, with the knowing that you are already the version you once prayed for. And when that knowing becomes stable, it becomes magnetic, it becomes inevitable. And that inevitability is what unlocks timelines that were always meant for you, but could only be accessed by the you who believes in them. Because belief is not just mental, it's energetic, it lives in your nervous system, in your breath, in your eyes, in your actions. And the universe responds to that, not your wish list, not your scripting, not your rehearsed affirmations, but the real you that wakes up in the morning and dares to act from alignment before certainty. And when that version of you takes the lead, the world bends, not because it has to, but because it wants to, because resonance is irresistible, it doesn't need convincing, it doesn't need explanation, it just pulls. And when you become that pull, you don't chase, you don't hustle, you don't beg, you just become. And in that becoming, you access realities that seemed distant, now unfolding, you access paths that felt blocked, now opening, you access power that felt buried, now rising. And all of this was never about becoming more, it was always about becoming less of what you're not. Letting go of the old you is not a loss, it's a liberation, it's the door to the truth you've always carried but were too afraid to claim. And now that fear is fading, not because it disappeared, but because your devotion is louder, because your clarity is sharper, because your willingness to live in truth is finally stronger than your need to be liked, or safe, or small. And from that place, the quantum responds instantly, not with a parade, but with precision, not with noise, but with mirrors. And those mirrors will show you everything that's still out of sync, not to punish you, but to invite you higher. And if you can meet those reflections with love, not shame, with curiosity, not control, with alignment, not attachment, then everything you've been waiting for becomes everything you're living. And the shift is complete not because you escaped the old, but because you stopped feeding it, you stopped narrating it, you stopped choosing it, and you chose presence instead, you chose coherence, you chose soul. And soul never struggles, it guides, it invites, it expands. And that expansion is not always comfortable, but it's always real. And the more you trust it, the more you follow it, the more obvious it becomes that letting go was never about giving up, it was about growing up, it was about claiming the version of you who doesn't need proof to walk in truth. And that version of you is not far, it's here now, waiting to be remembered. And when you remember them, when you let them lead, when you drop the old identity, not by force, but by choice, everything begins to reconfigure, not through effort, but through energy, not through willpower, but through willingness. Because the field is not moved by demand, it is moved by embodiment. And embodiment begins in the smallest of ways, in how you breathe when no one's watching, in how you speak to yourself, in how you respond to silence, to doubt, to delay, with softness, with steadiness, with knowing. And when you live like that, not for show, not for validation, but because it is who you are, the quantum responds, not randomly, not sometimes, but always. And the shift you thought would take years happens in moments. The reality you thought was impossible becomes inevitable, because you're no longer asking from lack, you're anchoring from truth. And truth is magnetic, not because it screams, but because it resonates, it hums, it lands, and it stays. And when your signal is that clean, life organizes around you, people feel it, opportunities open, timelines align, not because you tricked the system, but because you stopped resisting your design. You stopped pretending you're less than you are, you stopped negotiating with doubt, and started creating from clarity. And clarity doesn't ask should I, clarity moves as if it's already done, because in the quantum, it is. And now, you are the shift, you are the evidence, you are the observer who decided to see differently, to see beyond stories, beyond limits, beyond illusion. And in that choice, reality obeyed not because you forced it, but because you became it. And that is the secret that was never hidden, only quiet, only simple, only waiting for you to be still enough to hear it. And now you have, and nothing will be the same again, not because the world changed, but because you did. And that change will echo in every room you enter, in every word you speak, in every creation you birth, not as effort, but as essence, not as striving, but as soul. And soul never fails, it only aligns. And alignment is destiny in motion, frequency made flesh, coherence turned into creation. And this is the new way, the quantum way, the way of those who remember who they really are, not as a concept, but as a current. And when you become that current, when you live from that place, when you let the old self go, not as a sacrifice, but as a celebration, you realize you were never broken, never behind, never lost. You were simply observing from the wrong lens. And now the lens is clear, the field is open, and the game is yours to play.